So, hi everyone, welcome to the Awaken Your Truth Conversations. My name is Denise with DeniseSimone.com, and today I am thrilled to be speaking with Katie Mitchell. Katie is the founder of MamaTheReader.com, where she chronicles her own growth from her joys of motherhood to the more recent experience she had with the sudden and very unexpected ending to her marriage. And so today, Katie and I are going to talk about this idea. Everything that happens in our lives really happens for us rather than to us. When we come from this perspective, we can walk through our challenges in a much more authentic way where we can find meaning, where we can really find meaning and purpose in our experiences. So that's kind of the theme that we're going to talk about today. So welcome, Katie.
Thank you. Thanks. Happy to be here.
Yeah, this is really exciting because I just love your story. I really come to find it really funny how I come across the people that I am having these conversations with. They're like, it's just no accident. And with you, I came across your article, Baptism, Buddhism, and the Church of Amy Poehler.
Huh?
And that's really great article on the Huffington Post. I'll put the link down below
Uh-huh.
for listeners to read. And I read that and I knew I had to talk to you without knowing much of your backstory.
hmm
And then after you and I spoke and we confirmed our conversation, I really went into your backstory and I was like, wow, your story is incredible because this is what so many women are going through.
It is.
And you just so beautifully express all of it on your blog. You
Thank
don't
you.
you don't leave anything out that most people would find shameful or just the idea of shame is really what I want to talk about also today because I think that's a big factor in keeping us from our growth.
hmm
And the way that you express yourself really just shows people that exposing that part of us can really be our most powerful gift,
hmm
right? That we can offer people. So I want you to paint the picture for us of what life was like for you during your marriage.
Okay. I think that it, in hindsight, was pretty charmed, right, in most respects, and definitely from the outside. I met my former husband. I was really young. I was 19, I think, 18 or 19 when we started dating. So my freshman year of college, and in hindsight, you're just such a baby, like you know so little about yourself. So we grew up together in a lot of ways. And the first 5 or 6 years were like anyone else's relationship. I think that it was great, right? Or else I wouldn't have made a decision to embark on a life, with someone. So I look back and I definitely had my eyes wide open in that respect, even as we got engaged and got married in those first few years, certainly. I think that when I became a mom, which I guess about 6.5 years ago for me now, I think I started changing in a lot of ways in one direction, and meanwhile he was having a lot of success career-wise and getting to know himself too. I think some of it's just that we were growing up in our own ways, and I was changing one way as a result of motherhood and just personal growth, and he was sort of changing in another direction, right, being motivated by different things than what I was motivated by. So I think that in ways it was charmed and perfect and beautiful. I mean, we were sort of middle class or upper middle class, didn't have to worry about money so much. We traveled a lot. He traveled a lot for work. So when I was a stay-at-home mom, I would tag along with him, on these trips and, Paris and Costa Rica and Aruba and all of these fabulous places. And there were moments that were beautiful and great. But then the last couple of years were definitely difficult for me because I think I was changing in ways that he didn't understand. And it's hard to not have someone, to live with someone who you feel like doesn't really see you, for who you are. So it was gradual, though. It didn't begin that way, but it definitely ended that way.
Yeah. And so when this happened, when you found out that he was making this choice to
hmm
end the marriage, what was your initial reaction?
Um, well, I was uncomfortable with the relationship that I was seeing develop between him and a coworker. And so at first it was sort of that unsettled feeling, right? Where you can't even exactly put your finger on it because you think surely that wouldn't happen to me, right? In hindsight, I can see how I valued different things than him and we were growing in different directions. But when you're in the thick of it, when you have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, I mean, you don't see it that way at all. You're just kind of getting through day to day and you feel like we're together, right? Like we made this decision and we're together. So I think at first it was just sort of unsettled suspicion on my end. And then it moved forward once I really saw the writing on the wall and found communication between them and that kind of thing to just sadness and shock. I wasn't angry, and I've since then worked with a therapist who helps me, work through a lot of things, and she's the one who pointed out, and I thought, why didn't I even notice that before? I skipped over anger. Like eventually I came back to it, right? Like a year later, and it helped me to set boundaries and that sort of thing. And anger has a purpose, but I didn't feel that at all in the moment itself. It was just sort of a soul crushing sadness, right? Not just because of the person that you're losing, but everything that you expected your life to be. Like I had this idea, right, of what the next few decades were going to look like for me. So it's crushing to look at your future and see, like, I don't even understand where I am, right? So this isn't happening.
Yeah, and I think that's so important because I think most of us have this big picture, right? This certainty of what life is supposed to look like. And when we have one of these expectations or something that comes crashing down on us, we start to ask ourselves these big questions, right? And so what were some of those? Did you have those big questions come up for you?
Yeah, I think cannot take credit for this one-liner because a coworker who's a generation older than me and had a similar situation said to me when I was in the throes of it, like I just confessed to her, this is what's happening at home, this is why I'm scattered at work. And she, shared with me that when it happened to her, she said she realized if this isn't true, then what else isn't true? And at the time I didn't get that as much, but then as the months roll by and looking back, I can see that that's exactly what those few months were for me. You know what I mean? It's that idea that, this was my story. This is what happened to me, but it could have been any number of things, right? It could be a cancer diagnosis. It could be that I lose, a close friend too early to something that I didn't expect. You know what I mean? All of those kinds of uncertainties that you just alluded to. I think sometimes you don't think about those. We don't like to think about it. And when your life follows the expected path, so I did all the normal things you're supposed to do. I checked everything off the list, had the 2 healthy kids, went to college, had a good job, had a good house. It never occurred to me that it could all come crashing down in any number of ways. You know what I mean?
Oh,
so that was a question. I think I suddenly realized, like, oh, nothing is certain, actually. Nothing at all.
Nothing. You say it so well in one of your writings. You say, bad things don't happen to you as a punishment, but they happen for you as an agent of growth.
Yeah, I think that, there obviously are lots of scary and negative and awful things that can come out of that situation. And it's sad and it's soul crushing and it's confusing and all of those things. But I think it also strips away, when it stripped away any expectations I had of what could happen in the world, it also stripped away expectations I had of myself, in a good way, like I don't have to become bitter, right? I don't have to take this particular path because it's what I thought my life expected of me. You know what I mean? So in that way, I think the unexpected and the uncertain sort of open the door for growth, that I could be anything I wanted to be, right? And I still don't know like where that story ends, but I can do anything. And then I think, from almost like a selfish or a self-soothing perspective, I look to books or I look to human connection to comfort myself. And so part of it is just sort of a natural evolution of that, right? Like I read anything I could get my hands on, not just stories about infidelity, but just stories, right, of people who had encountered something unexpected, right, or who had changed from this or that event in her life. And I read and read and read everything I could get my hands on. Then I think all of those voices have kind of worked together,
Mm,
and spurred my growth in a way.
yes, absolutely. And you mentioned human connection, and I love that you bring that to the forefront so well in your writing on your blog. How do you think that this experience has helped you connect more authentically and just more deeply with your readers?
I think some of it happened by accident a little bit. My blog was really tiny. I mean, I had, a handful of people, like 100 or something, really a small handful, who read, and half of them were friends and family and people who knew me, and it really was just sort of this like secret diary for me almost, right, where I would talk about what I was doing or how I was changing or what my kids were doing. And so at first, when I was so open about what I was experiencing and all of it, right, the pain and all of its raw pieces, it wasn't intimidating to me because it was really mostly for myself to chronicle my growth, right, and for my inner circle. And then what's funny is that people, I think, are drawn to authenticity, right? Like our own cracks are the last thing we want to show to everybody else, but they're the first thing we want to see in everybody else. It's
Mm-hmm.
comforting, I think, to see that. And so some of that happened unintentionally, right, where people were kind of finding me that way, right? Or I would write an essay that would get picked up somewhere, and people would kind of resonate with that raw emotion, right? And sort of the confessional tone of a lot of what I say and write. And so I think it came as a surprise to me, even how much people relate to authenticity and how much people crave it, really. But
Mm.
then when I saw how that was working, and the emails that I get from readers and that sort of thing, it takes all the fear away, right? As I'm moving forward, it makes me not so scared at all to talk about whatever it is that I'm encountering, I think.
Yeah, and tell me why people crave. I like that you say that. Why do people crave authenticity? Why do you think that?
Um, I think that we all, like, whether we admit it or not, we might try to look, perfect and put together and all of those things. But I think that we're all hoping to find that common thread with somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
and we're all hoping that we're not the only ones who feel this way. So I think that when you finally have the nerve to open up, and this could be, in a one-on-one conversation with someone, or sometimes even in little ways in the classroom. I'm a teacher as well. So in the classroom, when we kind of open up in the smallest ways, I think people love to see that and to hear that because they realize, like, oh, it's not just me. I'm not the only one who feels this.
Yes, absolutely. So, in one of your articles, Enough as I Am, I love
Mm-hmm.
that article, and I'll put the link below too for that because that's a blog you want to read, and it's at scarymommy.com. Um, you talk about you go through this description of how your mind just completely shames you. You describe so much in detail of how you are just being so self-critical of yourself when you're going through the lowest, I would say probably one of the lowest points. Uh,
It was the low, I think.
yeah, and just the way you really portray the way our mind can just shame us and criticize us and just put us in this real darkness. And then you bring it to this place where I love how you say that the people that come into our lives, they're each our teacher.
Hmm.
And you had somebody in that low point come to you and say something very powerful to you. Do you remember what that was?
Yes. It's not all about you, which is something that we twist. It's kind of a common saying, and I don't mean it the way that we say it, like it's not all about you, get over
Right,
yourself.
right.
But yeah, the idea that it's not something you did, right?
Hmm.
It could be about the other person. It likely is always about the other person and whatever they're dealing with. Yeah.
Yeah. And would you say that completely shifted your perception around how you were seeing this experience?
Yes. Yeah. Or
Mm-hmm.
at least that was what started it, you know? I think the months that came after that was sort of like, peeling the layers of that idea. And I still am, for that matter, because I think as women, especially, we're worried about if we measure up, it's always kind of somewhere in your mind, just as a construct of society and the world that we live in. So I'm still a work in progress in that way. But I think that's the number one reason in ways I'm grateful for my experience and how my marriage ended, really, in a weird way. Because I think that for me, nothing else would have taught me that lesson in the same way, with the same sort of intensity and power.
That's really beautiful. So tell me about that, because I'm a firm believer in gratitude as a way to open our eyes to not just what's working for us, but also to be grateful when things aren't working for us, because there's always a lesson and there's always something there that we need to see. It's just a matter of if we're willing to see it with our eyes open.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you see this experience? And I know, the healing is still progressing and you're still, going through this. But as you reflect back, how do you see it as a gift? And how do you see it in a way that you can actually just say thank you for this experience?
I think it's taught me a lot of things. I think that my time alone now too, is continuing to teach me more and
Mm-hmm.
more. So yeah, I think the enough essay that I wrote, which was almost a year ago, I wrote that last July, and that was the first time I really sort of ripped the Band-Aid off of all of it, and probably definitely the most detail I think I will give ever, to exactly how it happened. But that idea that we are enough as women is so huge for us, So that's the number one lesson I think that I'm glad that I learned. But other things too, I've learned a lot about authenticity, I think, and seeing how people appreciate it, right? As we were talking about before, and how it allows you to relate to people on a whole different level than how I was relating to people before. I think that's been huge for me. I think on another note, I've realized a lot about materialism even, and sort of the trappings of American society, especially, that we always want everything to look so perfect on the outside. And I think that, once I had all of that stripped away from me, that I wasn't this, stereotypical sort of normal, two-parent family, two kids in the suburbs, etc. Once all that was stripped away, I think that's only when I even saw a lot of what's really there, right? Instead of just what you're always trying to do for other people, and not just in a negative way, but always do for your kids, right? And for your husband and for your boss, like all of these things these roles that I fulfilled for everybody else.
Mm.
I think that having all of it stripped away and sort of having to fill it all up again somehow in a new way is something I'm grateful for too. Because not everybody gets that chance. Some people just kind of keep going, right, with the expectations and the roles and don't
Yes.
have the chance to start all over. So in that way, I'm grateful.
Yes. Yes. Very well said. And it's funny how you say that. Not everybody gets that chance, but isn't it amazing that it takes losing something so
Right.
big to have to see that
Right.
powerful insight, right?
Right. I know.
So tell me how this experience has changed motherhood for you. Has it shifted your relationship with your children?
It had. I worry so much less about the little things. You know what I mean? I feel like if they're loved and they're cared for, then we're doing okay. You know what I mean? So if it's a day when someone was supposed to bring cookies into her class and I forgot to get them, right? And so I'm like running out to buy some store-bought cookies instead of sending in something I make or whatever. There are little things like that we come to associate with what we're supposed to do as a mom, and I used to worry a lot about those things and I don't anymore.
Mm.
I think some of that's, again, because I'm more authentic than I used to be and I realize what's important. And some of it's just a side effect of having one parent in a busy house with two kids. You know what I mean? Like there's only so many things that I can worry about. So I think that getting rid of all of those worries leaves more space for us to be real with each other, and to enjoy each other on a different level, right? Without having to worry about all of those little things, I think. So, and I mean, we're all healing, they're doing pretty well. Both of them are. And they were young when it happened. So I think in ways that makes it easier for them to adjust than when you're older and you understand relationships and sexuality and all of those things. I think would be a lot harder for them, but we're still all three healing, and so I think that process is painful sometimes, but it's a bonding experience for us too. I think to come through the three of us together, this hardship, and to be something else on the other side.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And so one last topic I want to talk about is forgiveness. Tell me how that has played a role in your journey.
I think it's different for different people. For me, I think it starts with the thank you idea that we were talking about before, the gratitude for what it taught me. You know what I mean? So I think that's where I am now. Like it's still difficult sometimes to, to think about what my life was. But I think that it starts with a thank you. Like I can realize that he, I think, did the best he could with what he knew how to do, right? With sort of the tools that he had. And I think that we're at two different places. We were somewhat before this happened, and now we especially are. And I'm doing the best with the tools that I have, right? And what I want to create for myself. And I think that he's doing the best and did the best with what he was capable of doing and sort of who he was in that season of his life. I'm not sure if that's making any sense or not, but people just do what they think is best, right? Even if it's not, even if you end up getting hurt in the process, it again wasn't intentional to hurt me, but it was what he felt he had to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Just separate those two things. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about how this has helped you to see. I believe that we're really not living if we're not experiencing some sort of fear in terms of facing it and then moving towards it in a way that it's giving us opportunity to grow. So anything that our intuition might be guiding us to do, that we know that once we're through it, we're going to come out more self-aware, self-empowered. So for you, has this experience pushed you in that direction of helping you to face fears?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's forced me in a lot of ways to face fears, right? As far as being alone, and I'm not alone in this, and getting married at 24. There are so many women, who do get married at that sort of age, and then you don't ever know what it's like to drive your own ship without anybody else's permission. You know what I mean? So it's an exciting moment, but it's also really scary in ways, and it feels like this sort of vast, empty page in front of me, and I don't know really where it's going to go. So I think the unknown is always, scary, and I've been sort of thrown into that land, where I have to do it. So, yeah, I mean, it feels scarier sometimes and more exciting sometimes. It depends on, what's happening and sort of what's swirling in my own head and how I feel about it on any given day. But I think that possibility is sometimes a scary thing, right? When you're not used to it and it's been more than a decade since you've had that possibility.
Sure. But now you're given this opportunity to paint your new picture.
Right.
Yeah. So are there any last words of wisdom that you'd like to share with listeners?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is to give yourself space and time to just feel it all, right? I think that it catches up with you eventually if you don't. I've seen it time and time again and heard people talk about that sort of thing so many times. And I think luckily I'd heard enough of those stories that I knew I've got to do it, right? Like it doesn't feel right to sit here by myself and to think about things and to take accountability. for it and to be honest about it. But I think if you don't feel those things for everything that they are, and you don't kind of take a moment to be mindful about it, then they catch up with you later, you know? So if I covered this up with a new relationship, for instance, or people cover it up with substances all the time, or just staying busy with work and not sort of being still, I think that's the biggest thing that's helped me, is just making myself like really feel it all, even if it's uncomfortable at the time.
I love that you say that you brought that up, because I completely agree that it is so important to feel into our emotions as they come up when we're experiencing any difficulty, any challenge. And I think the norm out there is that most people tend to, like you said, run from them through distractions.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's the thing, though, to really own that our emotions are real and that they're there to be felt. And actually, they can give us really good messages if we're willing to listen to them,
Mm-hmm.
right? But at the same time, we'll run so far in the other direction because feeling them can be very, very, very challenging.
It can.
So for you, what gives you that courage? Is it just is it just the knowing that you know it's going to backfire if you don't?
Yeah, I think that was part of it in the beginning. That was definitely my fear about jumping into a relationship, which I think is honestly what a lot of divorced women do,
Mm-hmm.
and men, you know, but especially in my situation where you've never known what it's like to be alone.
Yes.
I think a lot of people are just like, you know, get right back out there and then everything will be fine, you know? And that was part of my fear about that. I thought, I'm going to attach all this baggage to somebody else if I don't take some time to work through this. And you can hear my dog making noise over there if you're wondering what that noise is. But I think also writing has helped a lot for me.
Mm-hmm.
For some people, it might be something else, right? It might be art. It might be, you know, some other kind of creative expression. But I think for me, it's been writing that has helped me to kind of reach a clarity. Sorry, one second.
It's okay.
Reach clarity. And that clarity only happens for me if I work my way through the emotion, you know? So when I sit down to write, half the time, I don't even realize where it's going by the end of it. But I do, I write it anyway, right? To reach that clarity at the end.
That's awesome. So, right, when something like this happens, would you say it makes us more compassionate?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's another way, another reason that I say thank you, you know, for this kind of thing, because I think that the relationships that I do have are stronger and deeper, and I'm better at kind of finding those people who get it. You know what I mean? Like, not to be at all sort of patronizing or condescending, but you can often tell in the first few minutes of talking with someone, you know, definitely within your first conversation, I think you can tell if they're open to sharing flaws, right? If they're really being authentic and real with you, and if they get it, if they get the idea of compassion and real human relationships, all of those kinds of things on a real level, I think I'm better at relating to people and also finding the people who can relate to me in that way.
Yes. And you're really great at that coming through in your writing. It's just, yeah, it's really powerful stuff. Really, really good. Yeah. So tell listeners where they can find you.
My personal blog is mamathereader.com. I started that about 6 years ago, I guess, after I had my son. And so there's a lot of time chronicled there, but the last year and a half or so is where I sort of changed subject matter, I guess, and got really serious in the way that I stopped skimming over things, right? And so I got a little deeper. I also write for Huffington Post. I'm a regular contributor there, and in a few other places as well. Sweatpants and Coffee, I have a few essays up. Mother's Always Right, another one. So there's a tab on my blog with a few other pieces that are elsewhere too.
Yeah, that's great. And I'll put the links down below so
Thank you.
listeners can check them out.
Thanks.
So this was really fun. Thank you for contributing to these conversations.
You're welcome.
I'm really just grateful that you gave me the time today, because really the intention of these are to let people know that they are not defined by our circumstances, right? We're not defined by what happens to us. We really, our true power comes from within, and it's really about how we choose to perceive our circumstances. So that's really the message here. And I find your way of handling your situation and your way of being so raw and real through your writing with it to be very inspirational.
Thank you.
So thank you, Katie. And yeah, well, let's stay in touch.